Hey everybody, welcome to week 5 of Psychology Quarantine Edition. As you can see, my mustache is gone. I decided that I want my wife to love me again. Today, we're going to talk about something we are all too familiar with during this quarantine cycle, which is depression. Um, it's mainly just the PowerPoint. There's not a lot of videos that go with this today or anything like that that I've been throwing at you previously. Um, there for homework you have the quiz. There's a little growth mindset questionnaire that is going to be as your like assignment this week. You're going to fill that out, see what your score is if you have a growth mindset or not, and then you're going to do like a little one paragraph write up over how you think that affects you, like the fact that you do or do not have a growth mindset. So we'll talk more about that in a little bit. By the end of the day, you should know what a mood disorder is and be able to compare and contrast depressive disorder, major depressive disorder with bipolar disorder, and how mood disorders develop and what causes them. So there's really two major mood disorders. There's major depressive disorder and bipolar disorder. Um, Major depressive disorder. Um, Depression is the common cold of psychological disorders. Depression can come on to anybody at literally any time. Sometimes it comes on because of a traumatic event. Oftentimes it comes on because of a traumatic event, but sometimes it just happens. Um, like around 6% of men will say that they are depressed at some point in a year, and about 10% of women will say that they're depressed within a year. Is it actually different? Like, are men less likely to be depressed than women? I don't know. It could be very well that men just hide it and bury it deep down inside, like Talladega Nights, and never talk about it and just slowly die. There's a major difference, though, between like being depressed and suffering from major depressive disorder. So, the way I describe it to people is it's kind of like a blue mood versus major psychological issues. So, it makes sense that if you run a marathon, you are going to be gasping for air. You know, if some of your favorite pet dies, you're going to be sad. That's normal. um, versus somebody where there's absolutely nothing wrong and consistently and chronically is sad. Like if somebody's sitting on their couch gasping for air, that is not healthy. That is not normal. If you're doing that same action of gasping for air after you just sprinted a mile, then yeah, that's normal versus abnormal. So what is major depressive disorder? Major depressive disorder is when somebody has the symptoms of depression for more than 2 weeks. So it is normal for all of us to become depressed. We can have a couple of bad days in a row. Your dog dies, something like that. You're down for a while after that. You get dumped, as I have experienced repeatedly. You're going to be upset. That's what normal people do. But, you should shake it off after a couple of weeks. After a couple of weeks, if you are still very tired, so you have a lot of fatigue, you have a feeling that you're worthless, you have no interest in hanging out with your friends or your family or doing anything or going anyplace, and all you want to do is sleep because you're tired, that is depression. Now, there's a difference there between being tired and not wanting to move because you're lazy and staying up too late, and so you're just everything else, and like legitimately being depressed, though. You need to be aware of that. So, bipolar disorder um, is two things really. It's a mania paired with major depressive disorder. So, when somebody is depressed, they're gloomy, withdrawn, and irritable and tired, and they feel worthless and they don't want to move, and everything sucks. When somebody's manic, it's the exact opposite. They're over the top, like slapstick happy, can't stop moving, constantly doing things. Like they're got all these great ideas and they're all going to change the world. And when people have major depressive disorder, like that's obvious. It's really hard for us to find somebody with with manic disorder because they do such like they seem like happy, super happy people. It's the major fluctuations. So like you see people that say like I'm bipolar and they like flick constantly, like over and over and over again. Um, like they're happy 1 minute and sad the next. That's relatively uncommon. It can happen. What's far more likely is that people have like extended periods of depression and extended periods of mania. So many great writers, composers, Walt Whitman, Sam Clemens, Hemingway, Virginia Woolf, all had bipolar disorder. The really interesting thing is that people with bipolar disorder, you would think that they would fear the depression more, but it's really the mania that they fear because they do stupid things. Like they have this feeling of invincibility. So, like Van Gogh had major depressive disorder, and you can see it in his paintings. Like he would produce very little things, and he would use very cool tones when he was depressed. And when he was manic, he would produce tons and tons of art with these very bright colors and things like that. And one time while he was manic, as a sign that he loved a woman, he cut off his ear and gave it to her. Like that is the type of stuff that manic people do. Like they're the people that walk into a casino with their entire life savings and say like I'm going to win big, and they put it all on red and they spin the wheel and then they hit and they're like I told you, and then they put it all back out there again, and then when they lose they're like uh-oh, well, we'll figure it out later, and then they get depressed because of their actions while they're manic. Um, Mood disorders are worldwide. So schizophrenia and depression are the only two disorders that are in every culture across the world. So anxiety disorders, not so much. Dissociative identity disorder, purely a Western thing. These are the only two that appear in every single culture. Um, there is one common cause of depression, and that's loneliness. So why we feel lonely is different throughout cultures, but it's always lonely. Um, there's some major gender differences as well. Um, Men and women both seem to have issues. Women are more likely, whereas men are like likely to have major depressive disorder. So when you look at how depression happens, it just starts typically through a terrible idea, like a terrible experience, excuse me. And then it stops for most people just as suddenly as it started. It just goes away. Now, there are some people that need, many people actually, that need help, like medical help, either through brain stimulation or different drugs that they can use. But for many people, like common people, it's like the common cold. Like if you treat a common cold, it lasts 14 days. And if you don't treat the common cold, it lasts 14 days. Um, for depression, it's the same way. Like on average, for the normal person, it just goes away. Depression increases exponentially through your teenage years, then kind of levels off. And then, as you see here, especially for men, suicide is very high in men, especially later in life. So, as people go throughout their life, especially into their 70s, the suicide rate for men is much higher, and it's directly linked to depression. Um, that's always a very interesting thing, is because women are more willing to admit that they have depression and willing to ask for help, whereas men have been told culturally to bury it deep down inside, and over the course of their life, eventually, like that depression gets to the point where they make the horrible choice. Um, there's a really interesting biological perspective to depression because it is a brain thing. It is a disease. It is not simply psychological. And so, one of the really interesting groups that they look at are like Amish or Dunkards. because their genetic pool is so limited, like their population is so small, and it keeps going inside of that same itty bitty population. And so you can literally track somebody with depression's genes all the way through all the different family members. Um, if you have an identical twin, the chance that you have your twin has depression with you is 50%. So that just goes to show you that it is very genetic. Your brain is physically depressed. It is not working. So if you look here, you see this depressed brain. It is slowed down. Then you see this manic brain. You see all of this red. That's the frontal lobe really firing. So quite literally, when you are depressed, your brain stops moving. It just doesn't want to think, doesn't want to act, and that's why you feel so tired. Whereas when you're manic, you have a lot of thoughts. Um, Serotonin is one of the big things that becomes really scarce when you're depressed. So that's why a lot of people, when they take antidepressants, actually get serotonin pumped into them. What it really comes down to is how people explain things. So there's a major biological part of this, and there's a major sociological and psychological parts of this. And how that works is that people, the way they explain things matters. So like a stable person, a stable thought, I guess a thought that doesn't change is, I'll never get over this. Okay. Um, People that think like globally, like where it's like everywhere, is like, without my partner, I can't seem to do anything right. Internal, it was all my fault. You end up getting depressed. Whereas a normal person or a healthy explanation is sees things as temporary. Like, this sucks, but I'm going to be fine. It's specific, like it's not forever. It's one little thing, and it's like, it sucked, but I have my friends and family, and so that, like, it's not affecting every part of my life. There's a lot of good things in my life, and it's not necessarily always internal. It can be external too. Like, relationships sometimes just fail. It wasn't all my fault. It can be back and forth. Um, we can do this like when we take a test, how we explain things, and that's why I'm going to make you guys take a growth mindset questionnaire. How are you viewing things? When you fail a test, are you stable? Like, about that, like, I suck at math. Or temporary of like, I didn't study, so I didn't do well. Like, what's going on? Um, Global, no matter what I do, I'm going to stink. Specific, well, at least I'm good at other stuff. Internal, it's my fault that I'm terrible at math. External, the teacher sucks. I know that you guys think that all the time. I have never heard a student say that it's their fault that they're bad at math because they don't ever do their homework and just copy it off of Slater. It's always the teacher's fault that they suck at math. I want you guys to start viewing or thinking about how you explain stuff in your mind. So I want you guys to see if you have a growth mindset. A growth mindset is accepting failure, understanding that failure is a very common part of life, and that you can change and control and develop yourself. So what you're going to do for your assignment is you're going to take that little quiz. I think it's like 10 questions. I can't remember. See what your score is, and then see, like, do you think that's accurate? And how do you think that your mindset is affecting your life? It's important that we realize that depression is a cycle as well. Something bad happens. Everybody goes down when something bad happens. Nobody just rolls right off of it. Everybody feels bad. But when you explain it poorly, you put it on yourself. Then you get depressed. Because you're depressed, you don't do things that you normally would do, like hang out with your friends, exercise, run, be happy, that would fix you out of it. Instead, what you do is you have more depression. So like, you get dumped, you blame yourself, you get depressed. You don't hang out with your friends because you're depressed. Your friends don't invite you to a party. You say you don't get invited because you're the stinky kid. You get even more depressed. And so you kind of toilet bowl down, down, down. That's why your mindset matters so much. Again, guys, make sure you're taking the quiz, you do the little homework assignment, and you do the one paragraph write up. Good luck.